On June 6, 1984, in the midst of the Cold War, Alexei Pajitnov made a new mind game of fitting squares neatly into a large box inspired by the puzzle game Pentomino. He called the game Tetris, derived from the Greek word tetra, meaning four, as each piece is made up of 4 squares, and tennis, his favorite sport. Alexei was aware that his game was addictive, even saying, "You can't imagine, I couldn't even finish the prototype. I started to play and never had time to finish the code. People kept playing. My best friend even said, I can't live without your Tetris anymore." But little did he know, this game would soon take the world by storm, topping Nintendo sales in 1990 and having sold over 20 million copies worldwide in a little over a decade. Today, Tetris is the best-selling video game in history, reaching a total of over 520 million copies. But as popular as this game was, the main thing that set it apart from the rest was one of the biggest psychological phenomena in gaming history. At its core, Tetris is an incredibly simple concept, only having 5 main rules. Tetrominoes are given to you in a random order, one at a time. Tetrominoes will fall downwards at a set speed. This speed will increase as you continue playing. Having a completed horizontal row will result in that line disappearing and all lines above will move down. If a tetromino reaches the top, the game ends. That, with a few other features, keeps this game pretty easy to understand. The main challenge, however, comes with quick spatial reasoning. Spatial reasoning is the ability to imagine and manipulate 3-dimensional shapes in your mind. This is a perfect description of what the human brain is doing to fit all the Tetris blocks together. That, combined with a dopamine hit of clearing a line, caused me to keep coming back to play. Suffice it to say, this is an incredibly addictive game. Though Tetris isn't the only puzzle that capitalizes off this effect. Chess, Rubik's Cubes, and even jigsaw puzzles also heavily rely on spatial reasoning skills. And despite the name, the Tetris effect isn't limited to the game it's named after. There are hundreds of things that achieve a similar mental response, including the 3 aforementioned activities. But what caught the attention of researchers was a strange occurrence that led to a fascinating discovery. Reports of seeing game imagery well after having stopped playing were popping up all over the globe. These were most commonly in the forms of dreams in the first stages of sleep, known as hypnagogic sleep. Some people even mentioned that they imagined fitting everyday objects as close together as possible, as if they were tetrominoes. American psychologist Dr. Richard Heyer, PhD, ran an experiment in 1991. He studies the neural basis of human intelligence and cognition, mainly working with neuroimaging. The purpose of this experiment was to find out how the learning curve of Tetris affects brain efficiency. When the stimuli are faster and the decision-making is harder, does the brain require more energy? After scanning the brains of Tetris players, he found that when people start playing for the first time, cerebral glucose metabolic rates skyrocket. This makes sense, as anyone who has ever tried to play Tetris knows that it is a very mentally challenging game and would therefore require more energy. Where common sense ends, though, is that higher levels of playing, usually after 4 to 8 weeks, requires less energy, and GMRs return to normal levels, while performance increases 7-fold. Although this experiment was incredibly interesting, it wasn't the one that caught my attention the most. On October the 13th in the year 2000, the Harvard Issue of Science contained a study done at the Harvard Medical School. The premise was to study the Tetris streams that everyone had been talking about. The subjects were 22 college students, 12 of whom had never played the game before, and the other 10 having from 50 to upwards of 500 hours of experience. Over the course of 3 days, each participant played 2 hours in the morning and evening on the first day, and 1 hour in the morning and evening for the following days of the experiment. 17 of the college students reported seeing game imagery just as what was said online, most commonly in the stages between wakefulness and sleep. Interestingly, they added 5 amnesic patients to the same study. Amnesia is the condition causing loss of memories such as facts, information, and experiences. These 5 specifically had trouble forming new memories due to lesions in the hippocampus, which hindered their ability to learn new skills. Despite this, 3 of the 5 participants reported sightings which lined up perfectly with participants with perfect memory. In one case, a participant forgot she played Tetris that day, and was shocked to find a researcher in her bedroom, though after only 1 hour of hypnagogic dreaming, she reported seeing little squares coming down on a screen and trying to put them in place. Also of note, when one of the participants who did not remember anything about the game was told to play again, she placed her fingers on the correct keys without being prompted to. When she asked why she did that, she had no answer. With these 2 studies, it's easy to understand why Tetris became the most popular game in human history. And the second study I mentioned actually gave birth to the newest official Tetris game, Tetris Effect Connected. This game was actually my first formal introduction to Tetris when I saw the launch trailer back in 2018. Though, thinking that this was an old game that could no longer be enjoyed, I dismissed the idea of purchasing it. That was until one day, in 2020, when my older brother showed me the Tetris World Championship of 2018. Seeing the face-off of Joseph Salih and Jonas de Brar made me extremely interested in the game. I thought I'd give the new game a shot to see if I could be any good at it. August 28th of 2021 marks the day I realized just how magical of an experience that Tetris was. Very quickly, this game had me hooked. So much so that I've managed to get 9th place in Canada in the Endless Marathon mode. Tetris Effect Connected was obviously named after the phenomenon, and it makes sense when you see gameplay and audio.
I'm yours forever. There is no end in sight for us, nothing could measure the kind of strength inside our hearts, it's all connected. We're all together in this love, don't you forget it.
The visuals were turned up to the max per se to reinforce this idea of mental imagery. And the music, which also reacts to user input and what happens in the game, is one of the most fitting soundtracks in a game that I've ever seen. Despite how ridiculous it may seem, this game actually manages to be euphoric in a way. Even the base game of Tetris was reported to be an emotional experience, so with the reactive visuals and soundtrack, Tetris Effect Connected manages to put you in some sort of trance or Tetris high. Again, that might sound unbelievable to some people who have never completed the game, but Jeffrey Goldsmith, writer of the article This Is Your Brain on Tetris, referred to the original game as being a pharmatronic. That being, software programs that induce drug-like effects in the end user. One of the more popular methods is to create a binaural music track which stimulates parts of the brain. If the original game could be called a pharmatronic, there's no reason why Tetris Effect Connected wouldn't be able to live up to the same title, especially because a common description of the game from newcomers is playing Tetris while on LSD. Though this video wasn't meant to be a review for the game, the bigger picture here is how prominent the effect is in our lives and how it works. It's commonly known that the brain is a pattern recognition powerhouse. You can discern patterns from things that are completely unrelated. A good example of this is that you can read common English words even when jumbled up. As long as the first and last letter are in the right place, your brain will do the rest of the work. This is because we naturally yearn to understand things, and for a game like Tetris, pattern recognition is very prominent. Your brain will create neural connections to allow us to see these patterns easier, how pieces fit together, what shapes can be placed where, etc. A quick side note, scientists at the Oxford University and Karolinska Institute found that these neural connections may interrupt processes that would otherwise embed traumatic events in the memory. These neural connections are what create after images. This is another aspect that Rubik's Cubes share with Tetris. In case you don't know, solving a Rubik's Cube is actually fairly simple. It's broken down into specific algorithms that you use based on what part of the cube you're trying to solve and where the corresponding pieces are. This means that it is heavily pattern recognition and memory orientated, causing after images just like Tetris. I've personally had these after images of algorithms after trying to memorize them. More interestingly, when watching somebody else solve a Rubik's Cube, I found my hands automatically trying to move to perform the algorithm needed. The neural connections are so automatic for me at this point that I need to stop them from moving when I'm not the one solving. Admittedly, that example might not help a lot of people to understand. So, to give a more common example, if you've ever been on a boat for a prolonged period of time and then stepped back onto land, you might experience the feeling of sea legs. That's your brain automatically filling in expected patterns, causing you to experience something that isn't there, just like the people fitting everyday objects together like a Tetris game. Who knows what the Tetris effect holds for the future? I'm really excited to see more studies that might broaden our understanding of how our own brains function. But until then, we will just have to marvel at the mysteriousness.